Well, you did somewhat answer one of my questions. I was going to ask about what kind of was it frightening to wait on your launch pad, waiting to go into space, knowing that you're going to have to pilot the shuttle. It's but it seems like you were kind of reflecting on the path that led you up there, and that was your main focus.
Well, that was a focus. Obviously, I turned my attention back to my checklist at some point. Um,
Oh, that's
it's
right.
weird. It's weird laying there. First of all, you've been in the cabin before. You do a practice load up, and you've been in the cabin when it's going through processing to check the windows and all this other stuff, and even a little training. But you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of hours in the simulator, which exactly replicates the cockpit, including, I don't know, hundreds of ascents and reentries in the simulator with all this stuff going wrong. So you're
So
quite
do they
comfortable.
deliberately make it go wrong, or do they actually just to test your skill set?
Yes, in the simulator, you train by the instructors making things go wrong. And so you lose computers, you lose jets, thrusters. You lose engines on ascent. That's a big deal. And sometimes you have to land in Africa because you don't have enough thrust to get into orbit, or you have to land up the East Coast at an emergency landing facility. Um, so hours, thousands of hours of training and checklists, and it takes a typical shuttle crew got assigned about a year to a year and a half before the mission. Ideal a year, but often there were slips. So you would train with your own crew for at least a year, and everyone would sort out their duties and the timeline checklist, the flight plan, and then finally you would get close to launch and fly down to Florida. 7 days of quarantine, and while your family is all and teachers and friends are all off partying at Cocoa Beach, um, you're in quarantine, still studying, by the way, to try and make sure that you can do everything just right. It's the missions are very complex. You have to work hard to get ready for them and work hard on orbit to execute them. But what a thrill! What a privilege!
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. And imagine at the time you're probably thinking so much about all the different things on your checklist that you'd almost wouldn't have time for to be really overwhelmed as you would be if you're just kind of sitting there with your thoughts.
I think that's an interesting observation and accurate. Um, you you can't just sit, float, and look out the window from space. You've always got another event coming up, coming up, coming up, and the flight plan is full. You're supposed to get 8 hours of sleep, but I think most shuttle crews certainly got less than that, and you typically work through mealtime and eating on the fly. Um, it
You're like
wasn't so
adjusting
much that,
something while eating.
yeah, the flight plans looked very reasonable on the ground with plenty of dead space for um, uh, things that you didn't plan for, unplanned events. But typically, once you got up there, things, for whatever reason, moved slower, and it was just a constant sense of responsibility to stay on the timeline.
And I imagine it's probably getting more intense even nowadays because a lot more people are having extended stays on the ISS, and it, NASA would probably fill up the calendar and just say, "Hey, like you got this checklist that you have to get through today."
There are plenty of people watching for the crew and the crew health and things like that. So the space station is a marathon, right? Over 6 months or even a year. Space shuttle flights were more of a sprint. Space station crew members have to exercise a couple of hours a day just to keep their bodies from deteriorating. Space shuttle crews had some short exercise periods, but they weren't really mandatory. You didn't degrade that much. You didn't lose much muscle mass or bone density over 2 weeks, so it wasn't critical that you got your exercise. So exercise often got overlooked until the last couple days before entry, where it helps you adapt to reentry.